Hey everyone, and welcome to the webinar. My name is Pat Reinhart from Conductor, and outside of being a 41-year-old man with a mohawk, I also lead professional services and thought leadership at Conductor. And today I am super excited to be here with Martha van Berkel, who is the co-founder and CEO of Schema app. And what we're going to be talking about today is what entities and knowledge graphs mean for AI search. We have a lot to get through, so we're going to jump right into it. But Martha, why don't you give a quick introduction to yourself, and then we'll jump right into the presentation.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Super jazzed to be here. I'd like to introduce myself with a knowledge graph. We're going to get our brains going thinking entities and knowledge graph. And so as you can see, I'm using Schema markup to describe that I'm Canadian. As you heard, I'm the CEO and co-founder at Schema app. I also grew up for 14 years at Cisco, so I worked in large enterprise. I know a thing or two about Schema markup. And I used to own a 1965 Austin Healey Sprite. And my actual car was in the movie called Losing Chase that Kevin Bacon directed. And so Kevin Bacon used to drive my car. And the reason I tell you this and why Pat's laughing, he's like, wicked, I get to win the Kevin Bacon game now. And you figure that out by inferencing or figuring out your relationship to Kevin Bacon because you understand my relationship to Kevin Bacon. And this is important because we're going to talk about entities and knowledge graphs and relationships and how you do that with Schema markup today. So a little bit about who we are at Schema app. We are a scalable knowledge graph solution for enterprise SEO teams. And you might be like, but Martha, I thought you did Schema markup. We do, but we actually underneath everything are this awesome semantic technology company. And so now as we evolve and as we sort of start talking about the relevance of schema markup and building semantic schema markup, we wanted to tell the world that we actually know how to do that. And we work with some really amazing companies to help them achieve that. So let's get into today's topic. So, as we all know, the context is changing, right? We have these evolving experiences and they're evolving daily in sort of, how information is being understood by whether it be SGE or the new Bing or Chat GPT, and bringing in these new experiences into search. And it's really changing how we have to think about search. And I wanted to just really just get into the meat of it right at the beginning. What's powering a lot of this new experience in SGE is the fact that large language models are doing a lot of this inferencing, and they're basically taking all that information that's being indexed and sort of being able to do, I'll say, like advanced inferencing or advanced kind of question and answers. And Pat's got a great example coming up as we go into that. What works hand in hand with those is knowledge graphs. So this is like structured knowledge, and it really takes away all the risks around large language models. But you've probably heard about hallucination. So this is where it thinks it knows the answer and it's going to inference correctly, but it gets it wrong, or it like thinks that it sort of can has all the facts, but actually it doesn't understand the context. And so this is, I would say, a principal kind of key takeaway from today, that like as we look at AI search and we look at these sort of large language models, new experiences, that knowledge graphs are a tool or something that we control that are going to help us sort of manage relevance as we get in. And so as we talk about, this as like the new thing, it's actually not that new. So in 2012, famous quote about moving from things to strings was like, we've been working on this geek speak graph that understands real world entities and their relationship to one another. Oh my goodness, this is the stuff we're talking about today. And so I always like to just pause and say, okay, Martha, you've thrown around knowledge graphs for a bit. What is it? So it's basically a collection of relationships between things using a standardized vocabulary to which we can then gain new knowledge and inferencing. And so if you think of my introduction slide, I'm using a standard vocabulary, schema.org, and I'm explaining the relationships between things, right? So everything that we're doing today in schema markup, if we do it well, and I'm going to give you some tips on how you sort of make sure you're really kind of maximizing it, you're building knowledge graphs. And a lot of the evolution that we've seen over the years from Google, whether it be RankBrain talking about how words and concepts, BERT talking about meaning, these are all the same thing, right? And in fact, if we were to look at the October update from John Mueller, his first piece on structured data, he actually gives a definition of structured data that frankly, like he hasn't used in a long time, where he said, it's a machine readable code that search engines can use to understand content. Oh, and by the way, like he also called out that like rich results are going to come and go, and that you should be looking for a solution that introduces agility into your organization. It's like he was like saying, go find Schema app, right? It's all good. So this is the shift we're in, right? And this is like, imagine what this shift has been in our business, right? Like we have to stop just thinking about schema markup around achieving rich results and more think of it about using schema markup to build knowledge graphs. And so this is really that strings to things quote I share, like in its full capacity, right? So we've moved from that lexical search, sort of words, to semantic relationships. And so we're also going to see this in the metrics, right? We're going to talk a little bit about metrics later, but like, this idea of keywords or words moving to this concept of entity and knowledge graphs. So it's really, I would say, like something that we really are now we can ignore it, right? Like it's here and it's impacting all of us. And frankly, it's causing a lot of ambiguity, right, as we go into the world. And so, what's an entity? And I like to define these because these words are kind of thrown around and they're a bit nebulous. So, an entity is a thing with specific attributes. And so, I often, if you know the schema.org vocabulary, like you're describing something and you're using properties. So, like an entity is like anything that like you're describing with properties. So that's the way you can think of entities. Now, an important thing, and I really sort of emphasize this, um, your web page is where you define your entities, right? So it's like this is the home. So if anyone's like, "Oh, we're going to define the entities on my website," and you're going to go query it or like relate to that, like this is like you want to define the definition of the stuff on your website and what you're doing, and schema.org really is that vocabulary to do it. But all of that lives there, and so schema markup now becomes this again language that where you're defining all the things on your website. Again, we're not just defining it to get a rich result. We're not just rich result hunting. We're literally describing the things you're trying to sell, you're trying to educate, the people on your teams, the services you offer. Like all of these things are what live on your website. You're investing in all that content. Now, how do you make sure it's really truly understood by the machines? And so this slide really talks about that evolution. And I'll say like some of the steps that we're going to talk about in some examples of how do you take control and execute on this. So I talked about like how keywords is sort of lexical search. So this is like the word kind of area. If we group words together, we're now talking about topics, right? So we understand like the relationship in these different pieces of words. We now want to understand entities and how they relate to the topics and with context. So this is really us not just saying, oh, I'm talking about Pat. I want to talk about Pat and all the awesome things about him, his mohawk, his 41-year-old age, his role at conductor, you know, all the fact that he doesn't drink coffee, like all these things, right? Because that gives me context of Pat. And it's more than just Pat, the word, or coffee as the word, or, conductor as the word.
Yeah, and I think even from there, Martha, like keywords in general, right? They're a pretty bad signal, to
I
Google, a
agree.
pretty bad signal in general, right? And SEO has been kind of rooted in the concept of a keyword, right? And now that, like we've been moving away from that for a long time, right? And now it's
Yeah.
going to be much more conversational and in an iterative fashion. And, like the more information that we can give Google to understand who is writing this, they have firsthand knowledge of it. It's not just about like, like how do I build a birdhouse, right? Like, people are sure, they're still gonna ask questions like that, but it's more like when Google gets that query in, they're not just thinking like, okay, this keyword matches to this website. It's more gonna be, okay, like this universe of keywords that exists around all of this semantically relates to certain passages within certain
Yeah.
websites, right? And I think that's a big thing that's gonna be a big shift here that we're gonna see.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, like why also those last two, those gold standards of linking things are so important is that just like you were kind of following my thought process in my introduction slide of how we got to Kevin Bacon, that's the type of, I'll say, like jumping across the graphs that's going to happen. And so as you not just define things, but then link them together so the machines can do that sort of jumping across the graph, that's actually what's going to get people to a point where they like truly understand things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really comes down to, so kind of thinking of like, okay, so this is a great conversation to have, but how do I kind of apply this, right? Like what can I do, or what should I be thinking about? And again, it really comes down to, helping Google understand who your authors are, who are the people that are creating this content, because, with the advent of AI, and I promise not to say AI more than 4 or 5 times in this presentation because many people say it all the time, you're going to see so much garbage start to influx into the index, right? And all of the updates that you're seeing right now, the helpful content update iterations, the link spam update iterations, all the core updates that are rolling out on top of each other right now, what all those are just filters. And Google wants to filter out all of this, broad reaching content that are just being spit out by ChatGPT, and that's what you're going to see a lot of people just putting a query in and then putting an output. And I see a question here, will AI generated output be acceptable? The answer is yes, but you shouldn't just put something into ChatGPT and then copy and paste it, right? Like it's okay to start your article and have a base of what your article or piece of content should be from that AI, but you have to go in and put the human element into it, the human, kind of the human touch on it, make sure you have to fact check it, which is the biggest thing. Like AI is not, 100% accurate. It's not even 40% accurate, I would say. So it's okay if it's a starting point, but you cannot just copy and paste it in. And, when you're thinking about that, Google's coming into your site, like, let's say it comes to a piece of content, right? What they're looking for is like, who is the author? Who is the author of this? Who is this person? Like Martha was referring to before, right? Like, who is this person? Why are they an expert in this industry, right? And then even more importantly on that, why are they an expert on this topic? And how can you prove, and think about this, like go and all of you, I implore you to go to your sites and the content that you've already written. And if you don't have authorship built into it or author pages or things of that nature, it's like, okay, like who in my organization is the person? Even if it's not you, that's fine. But if it is you, like, are you linking to their LinkedIn profiles? Do you have author pages for them? Do they have, if a Wikipedia page exists, do we link to and from that? Then also, do we provide other articles and publications that this person has been, has contributed to both on your website and elsewhere? And also, like, have we gone the back end and used schema markup to say who this author is, right? And just to kind of give you a real world, example, here's my author page on Conductor, and look at that not tired guy, in that headshot, right? But like, all joking aside, and just want to point out, like, you can see on the bottom corner of my headshot, you can see there's a link to my LinkedIn profile. Google can now go to my LinkedIn profile and understand that I've been in SEO for over 20 years. And it's like, okay, this person is, this person is an authority in this space. And then also kind of looking through that, you can see the breadcrumbs like home, leadership, Pat Reinhart. They understand who I am at Conductor then. Okay, so now Pat is a 20-year vet in SEO, and he's also, a VP at Conductor. So he's a leader at SEO, focused, technology, and we know his career history. And then again, my name and title, clearly stated, but also the additional articles below me. Does he write anything else, right? I have probably 100 articles written on conductor.com and all over the internet. And what we're doing here is we're building that knowledge graph that Martha is talking about, is that now on this page, Google can understand who I am, what other articles I have written, and it can also see external external stuff that we, that I've contributed to as well. So that is kind of like a real world example of how you can kind of set this up on your website. But then kind of
can I just call out, like, so the top of that was like linking things to disambiguate, right? So the linking to LinkedIn,
Yep.
or like the authors, like actually having a link back to the articles you've written, like that's part of that building knowledge graph, right? It's going beyond just like explaining what this page is, but then also explaining how it's related to the other things.
Yep, absolutely. All right, cool. And then kind of moving on from here, we go into, start talking about, semantics, which I'll pass it back over to Martha for.
Sure. So I wanted to find this term because there's some quotes from Google that I think explain how, like, they're thinking about this, right? So semantics is also the study of the term of language and expressing meaning, right? And the rules of it abides in an order to convey this meaning. And so schema.org is all of this, right? Like, it's explaining the semantics on specific topics. And the reason why I call this out is because there's been comments by people like Ryan Levering from Google and Fabrice Cannell from Bing, where they're using these words sort of like very fluidly, like but they're actually telling us that, again, we should be building connected knowledge graphs with schema markup. So Ryan Levering, on a response from John Mueller on Mastodon, where he was saying, like, should you do schema markup, just for rich results, or should you do pages? He was like, over time, richer, correct semantics will favor more connected graphs, right? Like, talk about it's like in code. And then Fabrice Cannell, who I would say is like probably speaking the most about how Bing is using data and explaining things. He's talking about great annotated content with schema markup, use semantic markup. And I did have a chance to spend some time with him at PubCon and have, I would say, had good indications that like what we're talking about is on the right course to what they're looking for as they build those data pipelines. And so this is an image actually of one of our clients' knowledge graphs. Like, so when you do the schema markup properly, you're actually like truly building those knowledge graphs. And if your organization is doing AI initiatives, this is then where I think SEO teams become the hero. Because if you're doing this with your marketing data, all of a sudden you have this data layer. So I call it like a marketing data layer that can actually also be used to train your own internal LLMs or other AI initiatives. And so I'll say that again, like the SEO teams, they do the schema markup properly, can enable other, I'll say, bigger AI initiatives across the organization. Booyah. Love it. And so we're going to go into a couple examples. Pat kind of led you off with the first one. We're going to give you one more just so you kind of understand, like when you're doing your schema markup and you're thinking about connecting knowledge graphs, how do you do that? So there's really 3 steps. So one is, how do you be specific? So I loved the example, Pat, you gave around like, don't just use ChatGPT output. Like, what is your specific lens on that? Or how does that relate specifically to the organization you're working on? Like, there has to be some specificity or niche element to the content. The long tail is going to win in this new world. You're going to then use schema markup to describe the entity and its relationship to other things. And then you're also going to link to other known entities, whether that be disambiguating with external sources, or you're going to use it also to connect with things internally within your own graph. And I think one of the key things we want to relate is like, this isn't just a game for SEO. Like, this is a time where that collaboration is going to be key. So content teams are going to write awesome content. IT team's going to make sure it's in an architecture that scale, has the right components, and SEO is going to really drive it.
Yeah, and everybody, everyone that touches the website is on the SEO team. The problem is not everyone knows that they're on the team. And that is our job, right? Is to educate them about why this is so important to get everyone on board, because you don't only need the SEO team, you need the content team to be on board with this, and you need devs to be on board with this as well. So when you're looking at that, you're thinking like those 3 entities, right? It's like SEO is typically responsible for content, ideas, optimizations, figuring out what technical fixes need to happen. Content is about content creation, updates, and ultimately the web team, dev team, IT team, whatever you call it within your company, they're responsible for the implementation. But the problem is these teams don't talk to one another, right? And what happens there is that, typically you see, that the dev is working on what they're working on, the content person is what they're working on, and all of their stuff is getting implemented, right? And then what happens? The SEO team turns out to be janitors, and we come in to sweep up the floor and to say, hey, listen, like, you guys didn't really do this right. And that, which is why education is such an important part of SEO in general. We have to educate our companies, we have to educate our internal teams about how to do these things and why they are so important, right? And that's why I always say it's time for everyone to adopt this always on mentality, because the best SEO programs that I see, big and small, doesn't matter how big or small your company is, they have this, somewhat mechanical, system in place, which is quote unquote always on, right? And when SEO is part of everybody's job, just more gets done more often. Because it's just part of their day to day, right? And to kind of to put it into like a real world example, like, what is this, right? It's a button, right? And if you have to push a button to run like a site audit, that's a problem. There is so much technology and automation out there. And, with, again, the advent of AI, that's the second time I said it. I said no more than AI. You can use AI to do these things for you, right? So when you look at how most companies run site audits, this is a problem when the SEO person has to push a button and then disseminate that across to the dev team. And really the problem with that is the time. The time that this takes is so debilitating sometimes, right? And you can easily cut this in half or even less than. You can probably cut this in a third if you just get these systems running and then educate the dev all of this stuff gets done as it happens, right? And you have technologies that are running all the time, whether that's something like Content King or Schema app. And when things break or when things need to be updated, those alerts don't just go to the SEO person; they go to the dev and the SEO person, and if they get fixed quicker, they're part of the sprints. Everyone understands the why, and there's no arguments, kind of happening there, right? And from there, that's where you really want to think about how can you set up something that's a little bit more real time or always on. And when you have technologies that are kind of sweeping through your site, that's how, I would say the future looking and forward thinking SEOs and SEO programs are being built these days. It's not that I'm going to hire 15 people to run this SEO program. It's like, no, I'm going to get the right technologies in place to take the tedium out of my job and to take the tedium out of the day and to make SEO more approachable to the business. And then I'm going to go out and educate because the technology is taking care of a lot of the tedium, the hard stuff for me. And then I'm just there to pass it along and make sure it gets implemented.
So much fun stuff. It's that idea of agility, right?
Yeah.
Because I think if there was one message that came out of the PubCon conference I was at in Austin this past month was like agility is going to win. And I would say the good news is as I've shared some of these best practices with cross-functional teams, the content and the technical teams get excited because they're like, oh my gosh, now I'm in the loop as to like how I can help and how I can move faster, which helps us all win, right? And everyone wants to have high impact in their company and in the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
So
And the faster that you move, the better off you are, right? Like, and it's proven, like the companies that we work with that, like people that can get things done in a couple of days versus a couple of weeks, their results are better because basically just because they're testing and iterating faster than their competitors and faster than most other SEO programs in general.
I think that's going to have a huge, huge, huge impact in this next play. And even John Mueller's quote, like out of his recent update or Unstructured Day, was like, have tools that allow you to be agile. That was like basically his one of his core messages. So I think we've like hit this one home, but just to give you one final example, I want to make sure you have like tactical things you can go and implement. So again, design your content to talk about specific things, right? So there was a question in the chat, like these broad topics, like category pages have been like, not performing great, like over the last 3 years or so forth. This is now coming like general questions where it's not like niche, like they're not going to perform anymore. Why? Because like it's sort of like that FAQ, like that answer that you're going to get directly in the result, right? And then you have to build them in a scalable way, right? If we're going to be agile and you can do these things, what are those key components you need on those different types of pages? So Pat, walk us through some examples and I'll give them a specific one.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know I mentioned this before, but Google's getting very specific, right? Like specificity is going to win the day, right? And it's not about that you can't write about broad topics anymore, but within those topics, you have to be specific about what is about what answering the specific query that someone is asking. And the reason I say that is one of the best things that Google rolled out over the last few years was passage-based ranking. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, you've probably experienced it. It's when you Google something very specific, like you ask like a very long tail question, right? And Google doesn't just take you to the page and leave it to you to find that passage within the page. They actually highlight it for you and jump you to it. And here's an example of this, right? So, and SGE, this is happening in my estimation, like for my experience working with it over the last few months, it's happening about 80% of the time. This experience is happening when you click on one of the citation links within the drop downs in SGE, is that they are using passage-based ranking. And again, and from those passages, what it is, it's not about the broad, like HelloFresh versus Good Food versus Chef Plates. It's someone asked something very specific about Chef's Plate, right? Like, what is that? And they highlighted the passage that was about that brand in particular. And what you have to think about is, as you're writing content, what are the questions that you can answer about that content, right? And you can look in, people also ask there's technologies out there to do this. Conductor does do this. I'm not a salesperson, so I'm not going to get into that. But from that perspective, always think about, okay, I'm writing this piece of content, but it's not just about the topic. What questions do people have about this? Do the research, right? Whatever tool you use, do the research and understand what people are asking, and then answer those questions very specifically and tie that piece of content to an entity that is well known in that space, or has a good, or has the idea, like knows exactly what, or has firsthand experience in that space on that topic.
Oh my God.
That's who's going to win.
You so just nailed it. And I think like the whole advent of FAQs going away, like misses the thing that like Amazon, Microsoft, Google is using this structured content to build that new experience. So it's like, do what Pat just said, right? Like write it, think about the questions, and then relate them all. All right, I'm going to whip through one final example. I thought I'd do software because I usually do healthcare, and I just thought I'd mix it up. You have the questions and the things that Google, Yahoo, and Bing want to know about each entity in schema.org. So if you haven't looked at it or your content teams haven't looked at it, go back to the dictionary, right? This is where things are being described. And then you can use that to say, which of these things am I actually talking about? And which things are also like available to us in our data or might be interesting to the person who's looking for our stuff. And then you can connect all those entities. And, we have tons of resources on Schema App if this is of interest to you, but like about nesting them, all right? Like, and we're describing a product. So each page should be talking about that one thing and how things are related. And so this is, again, where the SEO teams can be that guide, walk them through, how you disambiguate within the vocabulary, within the entity that you're wanting to be understood. So then when Google is crawling your graph and trying to pull it all together in that new AI search, experience, all these things are connected and related. And this is, again, like when you think of the schema markup and process, it's like strategy, authoring, deployment, maintenance, measurement, like all these things have to keep happening at hyperspeed, and now with a much broader piece. And so the last one that I think really is like the metrics are also changing. And I think, Pat, you hit on this, like when we were talking about passages, is like that data is going to be pulled up. And like sometimes you're going to get the clicks, sometimes you won't. Where your content's really effective, you are going to see an increase in click-through rate. And by the way, Fabrice Cannell confirmed this for me in September, that we might see a decrease with impressions and clicks, but we will see where we see higher click-through rates is actually where we're seeing quality piece. The second one is around agility. We got to be able to move fast, and we have to work together to do that. So that teamwork stuff that Pat was talking about is so important. And then the final piece is there's going to be new metrics. And there was a question in here from someone was saying, like, how do we actually understand our quality and where we're going? Well, good news, like those tools and measures are evolving. Again, we live in the world of schema markup, so we'll be coming up with stuff to help us do this, because we need, as SEOs, new tools and new ways of looking at this. That's what we had.
Yeah. And, from that perspective, everybody, I know we have a couple of minutes left, but I just want to take a moment to, kind of thank everybody, for taking the time today. I know 30 minutes of your time is hard. And, I know it's very valuable, but Martha and I really appreciate you listening to us kind of jam back and forth with each other. I love presenting with Martha. She has great energy, and she's one of the few people in the industry that matches my energy, people say.
Yeah.
I always appreciate her. But from that perspective, if you want more information, more training on Schema, I see a couple of people asking for it. Definitely hit Martha up. We've been working with Schema app for many years. They're an amazing company, amazing technology. And if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. But everybody, thank you so much for spending 30 minutes of your valuable time with us. Martha, thank you so much for taking the time with me today. It was a great conversation. And everybody, I hope to see you at the next webinar. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye, y'all.